So if there was one question you think we should all be asking ourselves right now about how the future is evolving, how we work and learn, right? What would that be?
So I focus on the learning again and education. And I think a question that is far too seldom asked is why? Why are we teaching exactly this and not something else? Why are we asking a student to do a particular thing and not something else? In writing, we see that the written output is a proxy for a skill. And we've been doing things in education for centuries sometimes without going back to the original question, why are we actually doing this? Can't we do this better, easier, more direct instead of indirect? So this would be my thing. And AI forces us actually to ask back again, why are we actually doing this? Do I still need to write? And the answer for me is yes, because it's the only way we can have to express our thinking. Nobody can do that for us. But yeah, that's the thing.
Yeah.
AI can help us formulate it, but it cannot replace us.
Welcome to The Future of Less Work, the podcast that's uncovering how work is changing one conversation at a time. I'm Nirit Cohen, and today we're diving into a question at the heart of education and the workplace. In the age of AI, where AI can write, think, and even critique, what does it mean to truly learn? To help us tackle this, I'm joined today by Dr. Marc-Oliver Gewaltig, a leading voice in the computational neuroscience and AI innovation. You might know him from his groundbreaking work on the €1 billion Human Brain Project. But today, he's here to talk about how AI should redefine what it means to teach and learn. Hello, Marc.
Hello, Nirit. Thanks to meet you.
Thank you for joining me. I've really been looking forward to this conversation because I just had a group of university educators challenge me during a workshop to redefine critical thinking at the time where AI can do much of the homework that they assign. So, how do we ensure students are still developing skills like critical thinking and creativity instead of relying heavily on AI?
So the space that we are looking into mostly is writing. And usually we learn to write because it develops critical thinking. And the idea now, of course, is that in the age of AI, where we can generate text in seconds, do we still need to learn how to write? I mean, I don't mean basic literacy, but I really mean the construction of larger documents. And what I feel is missing in the argument is really to understand why are we writing in the first place? And we are writing in the first place to translate our knowledge, our feelings, our ideas into words so that others can also benefit from them. Now, AI can write a text, but it doesn't write what I want to write. It writes something that is actually very generic. So
doesn't that depend on how I interact with the tools?
It certainly depends on how I interact with the tool, but there's still a limited level of control, because if you want to tell the AI what you have to or what you want written, you still have to somehow dress that in words, right? If you have a certain opinion and a certain experience, let's say there's an event in your life that you want to bring down on paper, or you have done an experiment as a scientist and you want to keep that or transmit that to a journal, you somehow have to bring that information from your head into the model to write for you. And how else are you going to do that except by writing?
Yes. So I think you're saying, and I'm not sure that that's controversial, right? That people should know how to craft their ideas in writing. I think the challenge we're seeing, right, is that in the old days, we used to say you give students an assignment, they copy from Wikipedia, right? And now we say we give them an assignment, they give it to ChatGPT and they copy the outcome. So what is it about the tools are there? We should learn to use them, right? What is it that needs to be done differently?
So I think there are two things we have to change. One is there is a gap in knowledge between students and educators. So already early 2023, a study was done in Germany among university students on the usage of AI. And it showed that over 60% of the students were using AI for their studies. By contrast, a very recent study among British school teachers showed that 60% learned about AI from ChatGPT, 20% were not interested in using AI at all. And the proficiency is very different. I mean, we also have this culture or this natural difference that young people are more open to technology as opposed to old ones. And of course, educators are hamstrung by regulations and of their institutions and also of the countries that they live in. So this is the thing number one. The other thing is that we have to rethink writing a little bit. Language is the only thing so far that we had that was exclusively human.
Human, yes.
Yeah. So if we, for example, compare that to other forms of expression like music or like visual arts, we always had images that were from somewhere else and sounds that were from somewhere else. But in writing, if you see something that's written, you assume it's from a human, and that has to change. So I like to think of it in a similar way as sampling when it entered music production. So before sampling, something was always sung or otherwise produced by somebody else. But now we could just replace something that other people have done and create new musics with it.
Yeah, isn't that though the same that we've done? If you look at over the history of writing, right? I mean, the moment we could produce text and hand it over to other people, they could take pieces and expand their thoughts. I think what you're saying is it used to be people conveying their thoughts into writing. And now when it's technology doing that, I think the question I'm almost tempted to ask is, does it matter as long as it furthers our own thought process? So if I am brainstorming with you, or if I am brainstorming with an AI that's learned everything that you know and is now able to challenge me using your knowledge base, for me, does it matter?
I think if we come back to the critical thinking, I think in writing, you're absolutely right. So the big difference is that if you reuse text of other people, it was already there. But what we can do now is we can iterate much faster over a given document because AI can not only write, it can also read. So the problems in education that we see right now is really that educators still think any piece of text is written either by the student or by somebody else. And we are not embracing the fact that I can generate a piece of text and then iterate much faster to achieve a result that ultimately is much better than what any student could have produced even after, 6 semesters of training.
And that's not a bad thing, right? I mean, I had recently written a Forbes article that tried to challenge this idea about AI plagiarism, because the idea that using AI in your writing is bad, I'm having trouble with it because it's almost like the technology is there, right? If you think of, there's education and then there's work, right? So when they come into the workplace, we expect them to use AI to do things faster, more efficiently, maybe broaden their perspective. So I actually want them to learn critical thinking and creativity and anything else that they can do with AI. Not just say, okay, it's plagiarism, so let's not, let's tell them not to use it.
Yes, but we have to be nuanced here, because there are two sides to this. There is the pure composition of a text, and there is the content. And what we have to teach is, how do you get your own ideas and your own thinking and your own agenda, if you have one, into a text that is written with the help of AI?
Okay, fabulous. So you're basically saying, how do we turn AI into a partner and not a shortcut?
Exactly.
Okay, fabulous. And I'm going to assume, because we haven't shared this yet, and we should now, right? That you actually created a tool that refuses to write papers for students, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So tell us about that.
Before I tell that, so the idea that we have is, in future, it is much more about the process. So if we look at an assignment that a student gets today, and let's look at why we actually can have a shortcut. Shortcut means you should write something, you press a button. Let's say you write an essay on Sense and Sensibility by Jane Austen. This essay has been written millions of times, and AI knows that. So you can just say, okay, give me an essay on Sense and Sensibility. And usually writing takes long. So you get one shot and you hand that in, and that's your shortcut. However, if educator and student are aware that you can do that, why have it end there? Why not use that as a starting point? So you start with an AI-generated essay. The next step is that you ask yourself, okay, what do I actually think about that piece? And then you try to evolve that and learn along the way. So it's much, much more around several iterations on the same document, several revisions. And this is where our tool comes in, because what we are doing is, we take a document that you or an AI have written, and we challenge it. We give you feedback along certain criteria that are usually evaluated by educators, and we push the author to go further, to go beyond, to go to the next step.
So if I'm an educator and I want to teach critical thinking, and I know that a simple question like, what do you think this author meant when they wrote this piece, right, is going to be a good prompt for a tool, and it will yield an essay, right? What are the questions I should be asking now to actually help the student think through what they've just done, what they've just kind of created?
So starting from this baseline, you can, for example, challenge each statement that is made. So you can say, okay, you wrote about, I don't know, the picture of aristocracy in Jane Austen's time. And how does that compare to modern time societies in Europe, in the US, or elsewhere?
So I can put that question into AI and have them write that out as well.
But if you have 40 people in your class and they all do that, you get all the same answers, right? So you're not moving beyond the average. You're still just average. That's what I mean. AI is just the baseline. If everybody is using it, you do not have an advantage anymore.
Okay, so you're telling me actually what I'm doing is I'm helping the person understand how to use the tool to interact with their own personal self to create unique value. Otherwise,
Exactly.
who are you? Right?
Exactly. Otherwise, I mean, there's a famous mathematician, Paul Halmos. He once said, to write well, you need to have something to say.
Ah, yes.
And this is very often overlooked. So because, if you give somebody the instruction, write me an essay about X, do they actually have something to say? We implicitly assume that there is some work that comes before that, so that you have something to say.
Yeah.
And
I think in the workplace, right? it becomes more obvious to us
Yeah,
because
in the workplace, it's much more obvious.
if I were to try to write a prompt for a tool that tried to get your kind of output, right, I'd probably not know how to ask an interesting enough question to get an interesting enough answer. And I'm going to say it's probably the reverse, right? I mean, if I am an expert on the future of work and all you do is ask the tools, tell me about the future of work, they'll give you a non-interesting response, right? So we tell people it's about this interaction with the tools so that you bring your own knowledge and thought process and, creativity and the way that you approach a problem to get maybe better answers.
Exactly. So I think the shortcuts, they only exist as long as we have a difference in education on the use of these tools.
Which really it sits with the educators. So,
yeah,
because if educators continue telling you the answers you can generate with AI and not ask you the questions you can't, you're going to get the shortcuts. So I guess my question is, how do you see this reshaping the essence of education, the why people go study?
So we have to refocus away from basically the proxy of a skill to the actual skill. What I mean with that is, if I take writing again, we took the output, the essay, as a proxy for the skill to produce it. We are not measuring the process. We are measuring the end result.
Today.
Today. And
And
that
we
worked.
shouldn't. Is that what you're saying is we shouldn't?
Exactly, we shouldn't, because it only worked because the only way we could get text is by either writing it ourselves or stealing it. But now we have a machine that can support us very efficiently. Yeah. So it's like if you judge a piano player just by listening to a recording of a piano playing, we can produce that with a computer long ago by a sequencer. And we wouldn't do that. We would watch somebody play the piano to judge how well they do it. And because the process is actually now accelerated, we can produce text much faster. We can also observe the process much better than we could before. So instead of assessing a final essay, we can assess all the steps from the baseline, from the first prompt, to all the iteration that it took to get to the final result.
And which is fascinating, because I think aren't those steps the skills we need to develop in the age of AI?
Yeah.
What are they? What do you think? I mean, I don't even know if I can ask you this question because I'm wondering, is there a generic answer? But what do you think are the steps?
So,
or at least the generic portion of them.
Whatever I'm going to say will be outdated in a year from now. But
yes.
from the perspective that I have now, the steps are really that reading and critically evaluating a piece of text, and here we're coming back to the critical thinking, they will take the center stage, because what used to be the hard part, the finding formulations and so on, this can be automated now. I think.
I wonder, can I just stop you there for a second? I wonder why you started with the reading, and I'm wondering, it's almost like about the beginning of the process. So before I even read a result, then I evaluate it. Don't I need to think about how I formulate my question, be curious enough, maybe broad enough, maybe, narrow, whatever, right? So isn't that the beginning?
That is the beginning, but it's very different for the different pieces of text you can write. And that's why it's very difficult to give an answer there. So if I'm a physicist after an experiment and I want to write a paper, I have a very different set of steps that lead me to the point where I write than if I'm, I don't know, a political scientist or somebody in law or somebody in business. They have different starting points. So what I assume is, okay, I have gathered some amount of information, and now I want to put that into words. It might be incomplete, so I might have to go back to gather more information, but even that is now assisted by a quite smart partner. And you said it quite correctly, and this is the way I see it. This partner is very powerful on the one hand, but the partner has their own opinions, and AI is not unbiased by definition. It can never be. It is also not reliable in the information that it has. It makes stuff up. We know that.
Yeah. Or at
And
least maybe brings irrelevant stuff or keeps out, relevant stuff. So you're redefining critical thinking now, really.
I'm not redefining critical thinking. I'm redefining how we push people to think critically.
Okay. How is that different from what it was 3 years ago?
So it is different in the sense that most of the work was done on producing the text, and you would read it maybe if you read your final result at all, you would read it maybe once or twice. But now and it's actually this reading and revising which makes you think even more. Because written language it has to be much more precise and logically stringent than spoken language. And it is only in this iteration that I read something and I question, how can this be read? How can this be misunderstood? And so on, where the stringency comes in.
So it's almost like you're saying the critical thinking is almost like I'm my own editor.
Yes. But with a support now, because
Yeah.
you can also use the AI to support you there. And AI can go over your text and say, look, this argument, I don't understand that, or there is something missing, or shouldn't you back that up with evidence? And all that a teacher cannot really do because they don't have the time to do that in depth for everyone in a class. But AI can do that. This is actually what our tool is doing. So it assists you there. And then you have to go back and ask yourself, okay, how can I answer that? How can I answer that criticism?
So like a personalized writing coach.
It's a personalized writing coach.
Right.
Exactly.
So actually, before we dive deeper, I do want to pose a challenge for all of you tuning in, right? How much of your own writing is truly yours in the age of AI, right? Wherever you're listening, there's a poll attached to this platform, and take a moment to share an answer and be honest, right? Have you ever used AI to write something with only minor, say 10% edits? Your options are yes, and I do it again, it's efficient. Yes, but I feel guilty about it. No, I've considered it, and I prefer to write everything myself. And it'd be really great if you cast your vote, and we'll share the results when this episode airs right on the post in the social media. Can't wait to see how people respond to this. And I bet if they're honest, we might see a spread of ages there, right? Some people saying, I use it all the time. And like you said, the others are saying, haven't touched it. Is there an age difference? Like the professors, they are less inclined to?
I wouldn't say it's an age difference. I think it has to do with the roles that you have. If you're an educator, you're usually bound by regulations and doubts whether you are actually allowed to upload something to a platform and so on. So there's insecurities around it. And many universities or schools even, they do not have agreed on policies on how to deal with this new challenge. And this, whereas a student, the younger people, they are much more, let's say, open. But on the other hand, in the professional field, I know that marketing people, they have embraced AI from the get-go because they think they can write outreach emails with AI, but completely forgetting that the writing of these tools is actually very, very recognizable. And you have to put in some extra work to make it really stand out and not just come across.
And I think that's why I asked you why you started when the writing was already there, because I'm thinking if a marketing person asks the tools to create the email, I could do the same thing. And so the email is not interesting, and I'm not a marketing expert. But if a marketing person brainstorms with the tool about the best way to approach a certain situation, person, product combination, then they're probably going to ask a series of questions and generate an email that I can't do because I'm not a marketing person, right? So that's a skill that we need to be teaching.
Exactly. So this is really, again, the thinking, the critical thinking allows us to go beyond the obvious, beyond the first step everyone can do. Because all we've done with AI, we've raised the bar of the quality bar of every written piece that is being produced.
Yes.
Because we suddenly have a machine that can write perfectly polished prose, but getting the content right is something that is still open. We still have to solve that problem as long as we don't have mind reading devices. And this is where the critical thinking comes in. How do I actually do that?
So I actually was really wondering, you have built this tool that works with me as somebody doing the writing to help me ask the questions that I should learn to ask myself, right? I mean, that's the essence of it. And I was wondering if we turn that into what should educators be doing differently so that they're coming along on this journey and it doesn't really make them obsolete, because I could end up doing all the work with the tools like yours, right? What should they be doing differently?
They have to focus more on the process, the iterative process of writing. This is not new. I mean, if for scientists, this is the daily thing. So before you publish an article, it goes through endless revisions.
Yes.
And in each revision, the article wins. In school and university during teaching, you do not have time to do this.
Right.
But it's a critical skill for anybody to learn. And now suddenly we can speed that up.
Yes.
So it's not that suddenly the AI is taking over the job of a teacher. That's not true. It's not true at all, because the teachers still have a good understanding of the rules of composition for text. What makes a good text? What makes a bad text? What should we look at in the course of the semester? Which are writing styles to emulate and which are not, and so on. You could, of course, ask that from the AI, but that would assume the person asking already knows what to ask.
Yes.
Yeah, which is not true. So
yes.
the educators, they still have their place. They can guide the students now through the entire process of producing a good document with the new tools that we have. And
so
again,
basically, the example would be, it's okay to start with a not very interesting AI generated piece of text.
Yeah.
Now you're teaching me critical thinking to make this my own, right? To
Exactly.
bring my thoughts and my knowledge and my perspective into this. What would be examples of that? Can you give me examples of some such questions, or what would your tool be asking me to do now?
So the tool goes over certain rubrics of evaluation. So, for example, the first thing it asks is, okay, is there a clear thesis statement in your text? Is there a clear message that you want to say? And even in AI-generated text, we often find it isn't. It is very vague. It doesn't make a clear statement. In fact, ChatGPT is very reluctant to take a position that could even remotely be controversial. And this is for us one of the biggest problems, but that's a different thing. So the other one is what topics, given what you want to write, and we always ask kind of a prompt, what you want to write, given what you want to write about, have you covered all the ground? What are counter arguments to what you have written? And we challenge you to actually find counter examples or to answer objections that somebody could make to an argument. So, because this we can do with AI, we can figure out, okay, what are the statements that you make, and can I challenge them? Yeah, can I actually find a counter argument, and then we challenge you to respond to that, like you are doing right now with me.
Yeah, so I'm almost thinking, okay, I would have loved to use your tool, and I write a column, right? And you're basically saying, well, I get that you're saying this, but somebody else could say exact the opposite, right? So
Yeah,
what are you going to say about that, right? So you're
exactly.
basically helping me learn critical thinking. And then over time, that's
I mean, you will quickly understand the nature of the questions being asked. So the next step then is also how logically connected are your arguments. So do you actually argue for the point that you make in a way that I can understand? Or are there holes in the arguments? Or are there even flaws in the argument? Should you back up a statement with evidence? Or is the argumentation already enough? This
oh,
is also
very
something.
interesting. Oh, wow. Very interesting. So it's almost like you've taken critical thinking and broken it down to a checklist that,
Well, it's the standard evaluation criteria that actually teachers use if they evaluate writing. So we are actually working with educators so that we have compatible rubrics.
yes. So I'm almost tempted to say, well, if it was that simple, why would educators be fighting the idea that they could, allow their students to use AI, but still teach them to get to a personalized learning experience?
Well, like so often when a new technology comes along, there is a period of confusion where people do not understand the potential and also the limits of the tool. I mean, even today, if we look into the news, if we look on LinkedIn or whatever, what people write there about the abilities of AI, it's absurd. So, but actually, just sitting down and trying to work with it and actually trying to solve some problems is very illuminating. You'll learn a lot about what you can do with these
Oh
tools.
yeah. Yeah.
I have a good friend. He's a lawyer, and he uses AI a lot to basically produce the boilerplate documents that you sometimes need in legal work. But he's a creative writer on the side, and he tried to use it for creative writing. And he told me that he very quickly found it's actually not very good at that, but it's amazingly creative at producing fantasy worlds. So he writes fantasy fiction.
Yes.
So if you have a world like Tolkien, and if you look at fantasy fiction, mostly they are kind of variations of Tolkien's world. But with AI, he can produce all sorts of very consistent universes that he can then use to write his stories about. So it's
Yes.
more producing the background, the backdrop for his creative writing than doing the writing itself.
Yeah, that was what I meant when I said you brainstorm with it, right? I mean, I
Yeah,
write columns for Forbes. I have this idea. It might start with data. It might start with a research, it might start with a conversation. And then I would say a brainstorming session. I don't have another word for it, where I'm talking to the AI and I'm thinking you used this. You basically said, well, that's critical thinking, right? I mean, it gives me an answer. I say, no, but I want it this way or that way. And we're having a debate.
exactly, exactly. So this is
Somebody
also,
from the outside might say this is really weird. I mean, she's talking to a machine, but yeah, I'm talking to knowledge base, right?
yeah,
Um,
essentially you're talking to a database with a language interface.
yes, exactly. And that for me, that's wonderful. And so I have a question for you. You kind of have this intersection, right, of science and technology and education. What excites you about the potential of AI in these fields?
Um, so what excites me is the ability to create an equality of opportunities um, that otherwise wasn't there. And I say that from the perspective of a non-native English speaker. So as a scientist in any discipline, if you're not from an English-speaking country, it is extremely hard to get something published because you have to achieve a language level that even for native speaker is difficult to obtain.
Yeah.
And if we look at the users of our tools, they come from basically a lot of third world and threshold countries. And AI is one of the first tools that were incredibly expensive to develop, but right now they're almost free to use. And this is new. I mean, if you think back, pocket calculators, when they came up in the 70s and 80s, they were horrendously expensive. The first PCs, horrendously expensive.
It's democratizing a lot of processes, right? I mean, it gives you almost capital that generates productivity that is almost free.
And if you are, I had a PhD student from the Ukraine, and his first draft of his thesis, it was very, very bad writing. But it's now with AI, you can actually turn a very crudely written text into something that is really compelling.
Yeah.
And I think we should separate the, at least in professional writing, the virtuosity of text composition from the actual performing of the science that we do. We don't, it's difficult enough to be a good scientist. You don't have to be a good writer at the same time.
Yeah, that's definitely true. I think also it's democratizing the access to knowledge bases.
Yes.
Right? So as we wrap up here, I always ask kind of my last question in every episode, because I believe we're co-creating the future of work, and I believe we should be asking more questions than having answers, right? So if there was one question you think we should all be asking ourselves right now about how the future is evolving, how we work and learn, right? What would that be?
So I focus on the learning again and education. And I think a question that is far too seldom asked is why? Why are we teaching exactly this and not something else? Why are we asking a student to do a particular thing and not something else? In writing, we see that the written output is a proxy for a skill. And we've been doing things in education for centuries sometimes without going back to the original question, why are we actually doing this? Can't we do this better, easier, more direct instead of indirect? So this would be my thing. And AI forces us actually to ask back again, why are we actually doing this? Do I still need to write? And the answer for me is yes, because it's the only way we can have to express our thinking. Nobody can do that for us. But yeah, that's the thing.
Yeah.
AI can help us formulate it, but it cannot replace us. And this is,
and I think that's the essence of asking why we're doing education a certain way, so that we help people write themselves based on the tools they have, as opposed to let the tools replace them and lose themselves in the process.
Yeah.
Wow. Thank you, Dr. Marc-Oliver Gewaltig. Thank you so much for joining me today. It's really fascinating to think through how we should be, well, teaching, but also ourselves, right? To evolve how we do things, how we express ourselves and our thoughts and who we are professionally and otherwise, right? For more about Dr. Marc-Oliver Gewaltig and Thesify.ai, check out the links in the podcast description. And thank you for listening to The Future of Less Work, where we're piecing together the ever-changing puzzle of work. Until next time, keep asking those questions. Keep sharing your knowledge. Remember to answer truthfully, please, on the poll, and keep building the future of work one piece at a time. See you next episode.